Birmingham is England's second city. Like every other major city, it has a murky past, full of violence, murder, and razor gangs. The most famous gang from Birmingham are the Peaky Blinders. Not just a popular television show starring Cillian Murphy and Helen McCrory. They were a real gang, not what you think that was portrayed on TV. This is a two-part short documentary series. We will explore the Victorian razor gang that the TV show had its name from, and the main inspiration behind Tommy Shelby, as well as Billy Kimber, the real Billy Kimber, and the racetrack wars of the 1920s. This is the real Peaky Blinders. To start the story though, I need to look at who are the real Peaky Blinders, because obviously there's a lot of mystery around them, a lot of fiction brought to you by Stephen Knight's creativity. Obviously makes up stories that he was told by his family, which you'll get into. Just like the television series, the Peaky Blinders were actually formed in the Small Heath area of Birmingham. Many believe the Peaky Blinders was founded in 1890 by Thomas Mucklow, and this was in an article from the Birmingham Mail. Suggests that following an attack on the 24th of March 1890, where a man had his skull fractured after a murderous rampage, this attack took place under an arching near the Rainbow pub. The man who was attacked was George Eastwood, who was simply attacked for not drinking alcohol in a pub. He actually went for a tonic, apparently. Following this, members of the Peaky Blinders sent letters to local newspapers declaring that they are members. These gangs were often full of teenagers, ranging from the age of 12, and the senior members being in their 30s and 40s. So basically, it was dads and sons, it was believed, a lot of them, and the sons' friends. The Peaky Blinders held the area of Small Heath mainly as a home territory, but they took the neighbouring neighbourhood of Cheapside away from the Sloggers, which was a massive deal at the time. But with the Peaky Blinders come many myths, and a lot of the myths is thanks to Steve Knight and the BBC series, which is inspired to him, like I said, from stories told by his uncle, his father during his childhood. And the main myth of Peaky Blinders is the disposable razor blades founded in the peaks of the caps of the gang members. They used to wear peaky hats or die caps, I think they call them. The primary razor company, Gillette, didn't create disposable razors until 1903. It's about 13 years after the gang was formed. And they weren't introduced to the United Kingdom till 1908, so it did take a good couple of years for it to come across the pond. And also, it won't be considered a luxurious item, as it wasn't affordable to the poor. So, as the urban legend goes, members with razor blades sewn into their caps would headbutt enemies, potentially to blind them, or the caps would be used to slash the foreheads, causing blood to pour down into their eyes of their enemies and temporarily blinding them. This quote comes from John Douglas's book called A Walk Down Summer Lane, which Summer Lane is a notorious street in Aston, which a lot of these gangsters were actually birthed from. And the author of the real Peaky Blinders book, Professor Carl Chin, brilliantly debunks this by stating that the name comes from a fashionable sense. They were pulled down the peaks of their flat caps to cover their eye, with the hat being worn on an angle. Blinders is still a slang term used in Birmingham today, as it means dapper. It just means the men are dapper. You are like pulling a blinder, like you're very good looking, if that makes more sense in a modern context. But the real weapons of choice of the Peaky Blinders would be heavy steel buckles, belt buckles that is, pocket knives, steel toe cap boots. Basically stuff that they can find at home they really used. The Peaky Blinders would find themselves in brawls constantly with other street gangs, mainly the Sloggers, we previously referred to them. Other activities would find themselves in with petty crime, and this is like far cry from the organised crime rackets that you see in the series. An iconic image of 4 members of the Peaky Blinders mugshot is circulating around the internet and is very popular. So let's have a look at each of one of them mugshots. Harry Fowles. Arrested at the age of 19, Fowles was known as Babyface. Like, it's not really a far cry of a gangster's name. He stole a bicycle and is wearing the iconic overcoat and a peaked cap. The next two is Ernest Haynes and Stephen McNichol. Both were arrested for bicycle robbery and home invasion. They were held in custody for a month. And finally, Thomas Gilbert, who seemed to be the gang leader along with Mucklow and the oldest member of the Peaky Blinders. He would often change his name to Kevin Mooney quite frequently, and he was arrested for false pretenses. And one of the craziest things was the youngest member of the Peaky Blinders was named David Taylor, and he was arrested at the age of 13 years old, and he was caught with a loaded firearm. In fact, like, the older members kind of had more petty crime things. David Taylor literally had a firearm on him, and like, these are the more famous members of Peaky Blinders, and they don't feature in the television series at all. But one who started as a Peaky Blinder later become a bit more influential in the British underworld of the 1920s totally was Billy Kimber. But that's a future episode. Just want to mention that he was born in Aston, in Summer Lane, but he did become a Peaky Blinder and hung around the areas of like Smokies, more closer to the centre of Birmingham. The Peaky Blinders would mug innocent people, but in the late 1890s and the early 1900s, it saw the Peaky Blinders target the police in a new gang trend called constable baiting. They would go on to kill Constable George Snipe in 1897, and in 1901 they would kill Charles Philip Gunter. They would become notorious in the mean streets of Birmingham and actually made a name for himself due to these murders. Now, with murder being another offence to the Peaky Blinders' long list of crimes, the West Midlands Police needed to shut the Peaky Blinders down for good and stop all other razor gangs across Birmingham, like the Sloggers and whatever was going on in Aston in Summer Lane, because that street just seemed mental at the time. If you look into it, like honestly look into it, it is fascinating. It could be a video of his own in the future. And they did become lawless, East Street, and the police became weak. The streets of Birmingham were poor and full of slums. Now the local government was seeing this, and it's time to look at what general life could be done to like improve the hardship these people were going through, because this was like the main reason why things were like going horribly wrong in Birmingham, because it was tough. Like, if you look at images, it was tough to live in. The street gangs were out of control in Birmingham, and the Peaky Blinders were causing havoc, and the innocent public simply had enough of it. The political climate was changing in Birmingham, and the city council wanted to make improvements to the city to crack down on these street gangs. To improve the city, they needed a strong outsider to enter the police, who cannot be bought, and his name would be Sir Charles Horton Rafter. Sir Rafter was born in Belfast, Ireland in 1860. He joined the Royal Irish Constabulary, where he earned his merits. Does that sound very familiar to you? Almost like Sam Neill's character in Peaky Blinders, Inspector Campbell. But he's a far cry from Campbell because he was a horrible person like Campbell. He became infamous name across Ireland, and this is the reason why the Commissioner of Birmingham City Police drafted him in to be the Chief Constable in July 1899. Instantly, he wanted to stamp out the Peaky Blinders and the Sloggers. To do this, he brought in several strong, fit men who could fight with him from Ireland. These men could not be bought and bribed, so the Peaky Blinders had no chance. And a big fact, this is not in like the script and research, this is from a video I watched earlier, was the average height at the time for a man was 5'5", which is very short. I think, like, I just use a Peaky Blinders act. I think Cillian Murphy's not much taller than that. But these men were 5'10" you were bringing in, so they towered above the Peaky Blinders, even the adult members. Rafter's men would be walking the streets in pairs, breaking up fights between gangs, and anything the Peaky Blinders had, they couldn't hide it. Many of the leaders would be jailed, which would send the gangs into disarray. By 1910, they would be gone, and many members would go on to fight in the First World War. Henry Lightfoot was the first person to be named as a Peaky Blinder when he joined the British Army. Harry Fowles and Stephen McNichol both experienced the first day of the Somme, where both men would get injured. One of the youngest members, Henry Fowler, was buried alive in the trenches on the Western Front. He returned home after being extracted, and he would not speak or see for some time following the war. Other improvements to the city saw parks being created to offer young children areas to play, which would keep them away from the violent streets. Many sports clubs were formed, like boxing clubs and football clubs. Villa Park, the home of Aston Villa Football Club, one of the teams that were formed to combat the street crimes that was going on in Birmingham, to offer children the chance to play football when that was becoming popular. Actually went on to do big things, winning the UEFA Champions League or the European Cup at the time, and now are a Premier League team with a lot of history thrown there. But other opportunities outside of sport was offered to these children as well. Youth clubs, cinemas, and better schools. Like, schools were improved massively. Like, this made the streets of Birmingham somewhat safer. You can say what you want for Birmingham, at least, like, now you can actually walk down the street more than what you probably did 100 years ago, or more than 100 years ago. Even the time when we'll talk about Billy Kimber in the future, the streets of Birmingham are a hell of a lot safer. I literally walked from Digbeth bus station all the way to Black Sabbath Bridge and didn't feel worried at all. And this, it did improve massively. There was one more street gang which Rafter would need to bring down. This gang would be an offshoot to the Peaky Blinders, but a little bit more powerful. They were the Sheldon family. The inspiration behind the Shelby family, after writer Stephen Knight's dad's maternal uncle was a runner for the Sheldons. The gang was made up of three brothers, Joseph, John, and the leader, Samuel. Samuel was notorious for being violent. Unlike the Shelbys, they weren't rich at all. Samuel Sheldon might have been the most fierce man in Birmingham at the time, but he was very short. standing at 5'1", which was even shorter for the time. To stand out from the other street gangs, they wore billycock bowlers rather than the peaked die-caps. Professor Chin described how rival gangs burst into the Sheldons' local one night with a revolver. One man hit him on the head with a metal kosh, and as he fell, another fired 2 shots. One went through his hat, and the other struck him on the side of his head, but it didn't kill him. The hat was a billycock, the working man's bowler hat. The Sheldons were responsible for Birmingham's most violent gang warfare against Billy Beach's gang. This would hit its climax on Garrison Lane. Coined by the press as the Garrison Lane Vendetta, this saw Samuel Sheldon take on Billy Beach. All 3 Sheldon brothers were sporting guns, but a gunfight would break out. Many members of the Beach gang getting gunshot wounds and fleeing the scene. When the police arrived, the Sheldons won, and Small Heath were theirs. But this was not for long. The Sheldons would be brought to justice, but I could not find when and what happened to them because records are very scarce at the time. And just like that, the Peaky Blinders were no more. Rafter cleaned up the streets somewhat from all gang activities. The city council gave young people a chance at life, with clubs and sports activities being offered to them. Sir Charles Horton Rafter would see an expansion of the Birmingham police force from 700 men to 1,500 men. He didn't just employ men though. He brought in a lot of female officers, which was a revolutionary move at the time because Birmingham was the first city to do so in England. He would go on to be knighted in 1927 for his services to the police, but his life would come to an end. In 1935, at the age of 75 years old, he passed away in his holiday home in Galway. This is not the end of Birmingham's gang trouble though. Following the First World War, we saw a new age of gangster, which would inspire basically the first 2 series of Peaky Blinders plotline. But that's a story for another day, because this is the end of the first part of the real Peaky Blinders. And thank you for watching. I hope you can stick around for the next part, which will be out either on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day as my Christmas video, because it is going to be a mega one, because it's a lot to cover. But if you want some more gang content by me, I have got 2 gangster videos. The Razor Gangs of Cardiff and Mad Jack Matthews. So if you want to watch them for the time being, or if you don't want to watch anything on his channel, which is fine, watch Peaky Blinders. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.